The one shift that changes everything. Picture two men, Marcus and Dale. Same age, 41, same street and the same zip code. Both got the same envelope on the same Tuesday morning 3 years ago. Laid off from the same factory floor, same severance number typed on the same form, same HR manager reading the same script about restructuring while avoiding eye contact. Today, Dale still opens that Tuesday like a wound every time someone asks how he's doing. He can tell you the exact temperature that morning, the song that was playing in the break room. He carries it the way some people carry a grudge against weather. Marcus owns 2 food trucks parked 4 blocks from the plant that let him go. And last month, he hired his old shift supervisor to run the second one. When people ask him about that Tuesday now, he shrugs and says it was the best thing that ever happened to him, and he means it. It took him about a year to say that without flinching. Nothing external explains that gap. Not luck, not talent, not who they knew. They started from the exact same square on the board. The only thing that was ever different between them happened in the 6 inches between their ears. And by the end of the next few minutes, you're going to know exactly what that difference is and exactly how to put it to work before you go to bed tonight. Here's the truth nobody wants to hear. Your life is not shaped by your circumstances. It's shaped by how you think about your circumstances. That's not a bumper sticker. That's the whole mechanism. 2 people can lose the same job, live on the same street, start with the same folded bills in their wallet, and 5 years later, one is thriving and the other is still explaining why he isn't. The difference was never the situation. The difference was the mind that walked into the situation. Facts don't come with instructions. You supply the instructions. That's the part nobody tells you when you're standing in the wreckage of a bad Tuesday. The wreckage is just material. What gets built out of it is still up to you. So let's break that shift into 6 pieces you can actually hold. Because a big idea is worthless until you can use it before the sun goes down today. Stop blaming the winter. There will always be a winter, a recession, a slow season, a boss who doesn't see your value, a market that isn't cooperating. And here's what most people do when winter comes. They fold their arms on the porch and wait for spring to rescue them. I'll get serious when things get easier. Things don't get easier. They get different. There's always another storm waiting on the other side of this one, wearing a new name. The first storm was called layoff. The next one might be called rent increase. The one after that, medical bill. The one after that, a kid who needs braces. They keep coming. That was never going to change. Nobody hands you a life with the weather removed. Nobody gets to skip to the part where it's calm. The wind doesn't ask permission before it blows, and it blows on the rich and the poor, the disciplined and the lazy, without favoritism and without explanation. Nobody gets a calm life because they deserve one. Dale believed somewhere underneath everything that if he was a good enough employee, kept his head down long enough, the storm simply wouldn't come for him. When it came anyway, it didn't just cost him a job. It cost him a belief he didn't know he'd been leaning on his whole life. That fairness was a kind of insurance policy. It isn't. It never was. What separates people isn't the weather they were handed, it's what they did while the storm was happening. Marcus used his unemployment checks to take a 2-week food safety course at the community college while he was still filing for benefits. He sat in a classroom with 19-year-olds twice a week, feeling every bit of the 20-year age gap, and did the homework anyway. Dale used his checks to extend the cable package because the news was the only thing that made him feel like he understood what was happening to him. And understanding felt like doing something even when it wasn't. Same storm, same envelope, different thing built inside it. So don't ask life to make it easier. Ask yourself to become more capable. The winter isn't your enemy. It's your training ground. Nobody you admire built something lasting during a season that was convenient. They learned to adjust their sail while the water was still rough, not after it calmed down, because it never fully calms down. That's not pessimism. That's just what a life is made of. For most people who end up somewhere worth ending up, the storm is the story. Change your language before you change your life. The words you say to yourself in private become the walls around your own future. And you lay those bricks without ever noticing you're building anything. It happens one offhand comment at a time over years until the walls are load-bearing and you've forgotten you're the one who built them. I'm just not good with money. I've never been the disciplined type. That's just not who I am. Each sentence feels harmless, an offhand comment over coffee, nothing more. But say it for 3 years running, the way Dale did every time someone mentioned Marcus's trucks. Well, some people just have that gene. I never had the head for business. And your mind stops treating it as an opinion. It starts treating it as an instruction. It stops being a thing you said and becomes a thing you are. Your subconscious doesn't fact check you. It believes the most repeated voice it hears. And 9 times out of 10, that voice is yours. Narrate your own excuses for 1,000 mornings in a row, and don't be surprised when your life quietly organizes itself around exactly what you kept saying. You weren't dealt a bad hand. You talked yourself into a small one sentence at a time. The way water carves a canyon, not with one dramatic strike, but with the same soft pressure applied in the same place for years until the ground simply isn't there anymore. Here's what almost nobody catches. The sentence doesn't even have to be dramatic to do the damage. It's rarely, I'm worthless. It's smaller. I'm just tired today, maybe next month. That's not really my thing. These sound so reasonable, you never think to argue with them. That's exactly why they work. A wall doesn't need to announce itself to hold you in. Now flip it. Not, I'm not good with money. Try, I'm learning to manage money better every month. Not, I've never been disciplined. Try, I'm building discipline one day at a time. You're not lying to yourself. You're not demanding instant perfection. You're describing a direction instead of a sentence, and that shift alone opens a door your old words had nailed shut years ago. Notice the difference isn't optimism, it's accuracy. I'm learning is still true in 6 months. I'm bad at this quietly stops being true the moment you start practicing, except you're still saying it, so it keeps functioning like a ceiling nobody actually installed. Successful people sound different long before they live different. Marcus was calling himself a guy figuring out food trucks for 8 months before. He ever owned one, not someone who wants to run a food truck someday, which keeps the whole thing safely in the future tense, but a guy figuring it out, which put him in the sentence as an active participant starting that same afternoon. The language moves first. The life follows it the way a shadow follows a body. Choose discipline over motivation. Almost everyone gets this backward. They think they need more motivation, so they chase inspiration like it's the missing ingredient. Another video, another quote, another highlight reel of somebody else's morning routine. And it works for a day, maybe a week. But motivation is a spark, not a fire. It burns out fast, usually right when the work turns hard and repetitive. Exactly the moment most people quit, right on the edge of the breakthrough they never got to see. Because breakthroughs almost never look like breakthroughs from the inside. They look like Tuesday. They look like doing the boring part again. Discipline doesn't ask how you feel this morning. It doesn't need a pep talk or a sunrise. It just shows up on the good days and the forgettable ones. Anybody can put in effort when they're inspired. That's easy. What separates people is what they do at 5 a.m. on a Tuesday in February when nobody would notice if they skipped it, when the bed is warm and there is no audience, no accountability, nothing but the decision itself. Motivation gets you to fill out the food truck permit application. Discipline gets you back to City Hall for the 3rd time when the first 2 applications get rejected on a technicality nobody explained clearly, standing in the same line, talking to the same tired clerk. Motivation signs you up for the course. Discipline gets you there on the cold, rainy morning after a double shift the night before. When the excuse isn't even wrong, you are tired, the weather is bad. It's just that none of that changes what you actually want on the other side of 6 months. Goals set the direction. Discipline builds the road, brick by unremarkable brick. Here's the part that surprises people. Discipline is not the opposite of comfort. It's the source of a different kind of comfort, knowing you'll do the thing whether you feel like it or not, so you stop wasting energy every morning negotiating with yourself about it. Dale renegotiated with himself every day. Should I send out applications today, or is tomorrow better? Every day was a fresh vote, and most days the vote lost. Marcus stopped voting. He just went. The exhausting part was never the work. It was the daily argument about whether to do it. Stop waiting to feel ready. Build the discipline to act without the feeling, and you'll discover something strange. The results show up long before the motivation ever does. Usually the motivation shows up because of the results, not the other way around. Which means everyone waiting to feel motivated first has the order of operations exactly backward. Invest in yourself in the hours nobody's watching. Most people spend 8 hours a day working to make a living. Necessary, nobody's arguing that. But here's the question that separates people over the long run. What are you doing with the hours after that? Marcus spent his unemployed afternoons, the ones Dale spent on the couch, watching every YouTube video he could find on commercial kitchen permits, food costs, and menu pricing. He took notes on the back of junk mail because he didn't own a notebook yet and didn't think he'd earned one. Nobody assigned it. Those hours were his, and he decided what they were worth before anyone else told him. Those small, unpaid hours, the ones that never show up on any paycheck, that nobody puts on a resume, are exactly where a different future gets built. Quietly. One afternoon at a time, in a kitchen that isn't yours yet. Learning math you'll need for a business you don't have permits for. Read the one book that actually applies to the problem in front of you, not 10 books that make you feel productive without moving you forward. Find the person who's already 3 years ahead of where you're trying to go and study what they did, not what they said in an interview about it, because those are almost never the same thing. Look honestly at your own last mistake instead of burying it, because a mistake you refuse to examine gets repeated with better excuses attached. None of it is complicated, and none of it requires permission. Once you stop outsourcing your growth to whatever's easiest to scroll, the algorithm doesn't care whether you grow. It cares whether you stay. And those are two very different goals wearing the same interface. You stop being at the mercy of other people's priorities for your own life. You become the one steering. And that shift, small and unglamorous, unphotographed, is where every real transformation quietly begins, far from the applause. Watch who you're becoming an average of. Whether you notice it or not, you are slowly becoming an average of the 5 people closest to you. Not because you're weak-minded, because that's simply how human beings are built. We absorb the standards of the people we sit across from at dinner the same way a room takes on the temperature around it, without a word being spoken. You don't choose to pick up your best friend's speech patterns, you just do. Over enough dinners, enough ordinary evenings. Dale's 3 closest friends were the same 3 men from the plant floor, and every one of their weekly beers turned into an hour of agreeing about how unfair the layoff was. Nobody there was lying. The layoff was unfair. That's what made it so effective as a trap. Every round validated the exact story that was keeping all 4 of them stuck at the same table. And every one of them left feeling understood, which meant nobody ever asked the harder question underneath the fair one. Okay, it was unfair, now what? It's not that they're bad people. Some of the kindest men Dale knows sit at that table. It's that their ceiling becomes your ceiling if you stand under it long enough. And ceilings installed by people who love you are still ceilings. Now flip that. Marcus started showing up at a Saturday morning meetup for people running small food businesses in the area. Strangers, at first, with nothing in common, except that they were building something. He felt out of place the first few times, standing near the coffee holding a paper plate he didn't know what to do with. But he kept showing up. He caught their standards the same way you'd catch anything else contagious, not through a speech, but through proximity, through hearing, "Did you talk to your health inspector yet?" asked as a normal Saturday question. So take an honest look at your circle. Not to judge anyone. Most of the people keeping you stuck have no idea that's what they're doing, and neither did you, probably, until just now. Just ask, if I become exactly like the 5 people I spend the most time with, am I happy with that outcome? If that question makes you uncomfortable, that discomfort is information, not an insult. It might be the most important adjustment you make all year, and it might not even require leaving anyone behind. Sometimes it just means adding one new table to sit at. Start before you're ready. If you wait for confidence to show up first, you'll wait for the rest of your life. Most people have this backward. They believe confidence comes first and action follows, that someday they'll wake up feeling brave enough. That day doesn't come. It has never come for anyone, not once, in the entire history of people waiting for it. Confidence isn't something you find sitting quietly by yourself, waiting for it like a package on your doorstep. Confidence is manufactured, and it's only manufactured through action. Marcus's hands were shaking the morning he served his first plate from a borrowed truck to 11 customers in a gravel lot behind a hardware store that let him park there for free. He wasn't confident. He was nauseous. He got the pricing wrong on the second order and had to correct himself out loud in front of the customer, feeling his face go hot. But something happened on the other side of that Tuesday that couldn't have happened any other way. He had evidence. For the first time, real evidence, not a theory, not a dream he described to his sister on the phone, but 11 paper plates and $40 in a cash box that proved he could actually do the thing. That's where confidence actually comes from, not from feeling ready, from evidence. and evidence only comes from doing. This is why so many good ideas die quietly in people's heads and half-finished business plans saved in a folder nobody opens anymore. They're waiting for a feeling that action was always meant to produce, not proceed. When I feel ready, I'll start. Readiness is a myth dressed up as wisdom. It sounds responsible, careful, mature, and it is none of those things. It's just fear, wearing a nicer outfit than usual. Nobody feels fully ready, not the people you admire, not one single person who has ever done anything worth doing. They moved before the fear left and let it catch up and fade behind them somewhere down the road, usually around the same time the evidence started piling up high enough to stand on. So stop auditioning for your own life. Take the step while your hands are still shaking. Serve the first plate before you've perfected the recipe. Send the message before you've rehearsed it into something unrecognizable. That first uncomfortable step is the only thing that has ever actually built confidence in anyone, ever. Not the 10th step, not the 100th, the first one, the one you're avoiding right now for a reason that will sound very small a year from now. So there it is. Not a checklist. One truth wearing 6 different faces. Stop blaming the winter because the storm was never your enemy. It was your training ground. Watch your language because the words you whisper in private become the walls or the doors of your future. Choose discipline over motivation because motivation is a spark, but discipline is the fire that actually gets you somewhere. Invest in the hours nobody's watching because that's where every real transformation quietly begins. Choose your circle carefully because you will rise no higher than the people standing closest to you. And start before you're ready because confidence was never the price of admission. It was always the reward waiting on the other side of action. Remember Marcus and Dale. Same layoff, same Tuesday, same empty calendar the next morning, staring back at both of them with nothing written on it. Dale spent that empty calendar explaining it to friends, to himself, over and over, a story that got smoother every time he told it and less true to what was actually possible for him. Marcus spent it building something inside it, one uncertain afternoon at a time, with no guarantee it would work, because there never is one. That's the entire gap between 2 lives, not talent, not luck, not a better starting hand, and it starts closing the moment you decide to close it. None of this requires you to be smarter, luckier, or born into better circumstances than anyone else. It only requires you to think differently, starting today, in this ordinary moment that feels like nothing special. Transformation doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives quietly. The moment you decide to see your life differently than you saw it yesterday. You don't need a new set of circumstances. You don't need permission, and you don't need perfect timing. Perfect timing is another word people use for waiting that sounds better than waiting. You need a new mind, because the mind that got you here will not be the mind that gets you there. Change how you think, and everything you've been chasing will start chasing you instead. Don't wait for life to change before you change your mind. Change your mind and watch everything else follow.